The maternity ward smelled of antiseptic and quiet exhaustion, the kind that settles into your bones after hours of waiting and worry. Outside the window, the city moved on as if nothing monumental had happened inside these walls, but for Alina, everything had changed forever. She lay in the narrow hospital bed, pale and drained, her newborn daughter sleeping in a clear plastic bassinet beside her. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell in soft, determined breaths, unaware of the storm gathering in the room. The door swung open without a knock. Valentina, her mother-in-law, entered with sharp heels and an even sharper expression. Her perfectly pressed coat looked wildly out of place in the sterile ward. She didn't glance at the baby. She didn't ask how Alina was feeling. Her eyes went straight to Alina's face, cold and assessing, as if this were a business negotiation that had gone poorly. "So," Valentina said, folding her arms, "I heard you're still here." Alina blinked, confused. I just gave birth. The doctor said I need to stay at least another day." Valentina let out a short, humorless laugh. "Doctors say many things. But my son won't be coming, and neither will I be paying for any extended stay. You've caused enough trouble already." Alina's throat tightened. "What are you talking about? Where is Anton?" Valentina's lips thinned. "Anton has made it very clear he needs space. From you. From this situation." She gestured vaguely toward the bassinet, still refusing to look at the child. "So it's best you gather your things and leave." For a moment, Alina thought she must be hallucinating, her mind fogged by pain and exhaustion. "Leave? I can barely stand. I don't even have clothes for the baby." "That is not my concern," Valentina replied flatly. "You always were unprepared." Tears burned in Alina's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had endured Valentina's subtle insults for years, the comments about her background, her job, her lack of refinement. But this was different. This was cruelty at its most naked. A nurse passing by slowed when she heard raised voices, but Valentina's tone softened just enough to sound reasonable. "We don't want a scene," she said. "I'm sure you understand." Alina's hands trembled as she reached for the bassinet, instinctively pulling her daughter closer. "You can't do this," she whispered. "She's his child too." Valentina finally looked at the baby, her gaze sharp and dismissive. "We will see about that." The words hung in the air like poison. Then, unexpectedly, the door opened again. This time, the man who stepped inside did not hesitate, did not soften his presence to match the room. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His tailored suit suggested authority, but it was the calm certainty in his posture that made Valentina stiffen. "Good afternoon," he said evenly. Valentina turned, irritation flashing across her face, until recognition hit. The color drained from her cheeks. "Mr. Levin," she managed. Alina stared, confused. She had seen this man once before, years ago, at a small cafe near the train station. He had asked for directions, thanked her kindly, and disappeared into the crowd. She never imagined she would see him again, let alone here. "Yes," the man said, closing the door behind him. "I believe we need to talk." Valentina straightened, attempting to recover her composure. "This is a private family matter." "Not anymore, Mr. Levin replied calmly. He glanced at Alina, his eyes softening. "I'm sorry I'm late." Valentina's voice sharpened. "You have no right to be here." Mr. Levin ignored her and turned to Alina. "How are you feeling?" Alina swallowed. I don't understand." "You will," he said gently. Then he faced Valentina again, his tone cool and precise. "I was informed that you were attempting to remove a recovering patient and a newborn from this hospital against medical advice." Valentina scoffed. "That's absurd. I'm simply encouraging her to leave. She's no longer welcome in our family." Mr. Levin's expression did not change. "You see, Valentina, the hospital administration disagrees. So does my legal team." Her eyes widened. "You're, what?" Mr. Levin reached into his coat and produced a slim folder. "This hospital wing is funded by the Levin Family Trust. I sit on its board. Any attempt to intimidate or forcibly remove a patient is a serious violation." Valentina opened her mouth, then closed it again. "And there's more," he continued. "Alina is under my protection." The room fell silent. Valentina's voice dropped to a whisper. "What are you saying?" Mr. Levin took a step closer. "Years ago, you made sure Alina never found out the truth about her father. You told her he abandoned her. You told Anton she was beneath him. Alina's heart pounded. My father. Mr. Levin turned to her, his voice steady but thick with emotion. I am your father. The world seemed to tilt. Valentina staggered back as if struck. That's impossible, she said faintly. You ensured it was, he replied. You intercepted letters. You spread lies. But you made one mistake, you underestimated time. Alina felt tears spill freely now, shock and disbelief crashing over her. Why now? She whispered. Mr. Levin looked at the sleeping baby. Because my granddaughter deserves better. And so do you. Valentina's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time since Alina had known her, she was truly speechless. Mr. Levin turned to the nurse who had been lingering nearby. Please make sure Ms. Alina and her child have everything they need. Extend her stay as recommended. The nurse nodded quickly, relief clear on her face. As Valentina stood frozen, Mr. Levin leaned in just enough for her to hear. You should leave. And I suggest you think carefully before attempting anything like this again. Valentina gathered her coat with shaking hands and fled the room without another word. When the door closed, the silence felt different, lighter. Mr. Levin pulled a chair closer to Alina's bed. We have a lot to talk about, he said softly. But for now, rest. You're not alone anymore. Alina looked down at her daughter, then back at the man who had arrived just in time. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, hope settled quietly in her chest, steady and warm, like a promise she was finally ready to believe. The television studio lights were unforgiving, bright enough to expose every twitch of irritation and every forced smile. What was supposed to be a routine daytime discussion had already begun to feel strained, but few in the audience realized just how close it was to unraveling completely. Sunny Hostin sat upright at the table, her notes neatly arranged, her expression confident. Across from her, Bill Maher leaned back in his chair, arms loosely crossed, eyes sharp with a familiar mix of skepticism and impatience. The conversation had started calmly enough. They were discussing social responsibility, freedom of speech, and the role of public figures in shaping opinion. At first, the exchange felt like the usual sparring viewers expected, spirited but controlled. But then Sunny leaned forward, her voice firm, and shifted the topic just enough to strike a nerve. Words have consequences, she said. When influential people dismiss lived experiences, especially of marginalized communities, they're not just joking. They're causing harm. Bill raised an eyebrow. Or, he replied coolly, they're trusting adults to handle uncomfortable ideas without needing a referee. A ripple of tension moved through the studio. Sunny didn't back down. That sounds like privilege talking. Not everyone has the luxury of treating these issues as abstract debates. Bill straightened slightly. And that sounds like assuming disagreement equals malice. It doesn't. The audience murmured. The other hosts glanced between them, sensing the shift. This was no longer a friendly disagreement, it was turning into a clash of philosophies. Sunny's tone sharpened. So you're saying accountability is censorship? I'm saying, Bill replied, his voice calm but unmistakably firm, that silencing people because their opinions make you uncomfortable is the fastest way to kill honest conversation. Sunny shook her head. That's not what accountability is. Accountability is acknowledging when your platform hurts people. Bill exhaled slowly, a thin smile crossing his face. You keep saying, hurts people, but you never define how. Feeling offended isn't the same as being oppressed. The studio fell quiet. Even the cameras seemed to pause. Sunny's eyes flashed. That's dismissive. And frankly, it's dangerous. Bill leaned forward now, meeting her gaze directly. What's dangerous is teaching people that disagreement is violence. It isn't. It's democracy. One of the hosts tried to interject, offering a neutral bridge, but the moment had passed. Sunny raised her hand slightly, as if holding the floor in a courtroom. Bill, when you sit there and minimize the impact of words, you're telling people their pain doesn't matter. He nodded once. No, I'm telling people that pain doesn't give you the right to shut others up. A sharp intake of breath came from somewhere in the audience. Sunny's voice rose. That's not what anyone is saying. It's exactly what's being practiced, Bill shot back. Cancel first, discuss never. The tension was now unmistakable. The producers shifted behind the cameras, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let it play out. Bill's expression hardened, not angry, but resolute, as though he had decided something internally. Sunny crossed her arms. So you don't believe public figures should be held responsible for the consequences of their speech? Bill didn't hesitate. I believe they should be criticized, debated, even mocked. But not deplatformed because someone decided they're too fragile to hear opposing views. Sunny leaned back, shaking her head in disbelief. That's an incredibly narrow view of harm. And that, Bill replied evenly, is an incredibly broad definition of it. There was a beat of silence. Bill glanced briefly at the moderator, then back at Sunny. Look, he said, his voice steady but unmistakably final, we can keep talking past each other, or we can acknowledge that free speech includes speech you hate. If you can't accept that, then we're not having a conversation, we're having a lecture. Sunny opened her mouth to respond, but Bill continued, not raising his voice, yet somehow commanding the room. I came here to debate ideas, not to be told that disagreement makes me immoral. The studio was utterly still now. Bill pushed his chair back slightly. And if that's the framework, then there's nothing productive left to say. For a moment, it seemed as though Sunny might fire back, but instead she paused, clearly taken aback by the firmness of his tone. She looked to the other hosts, then back at Bill. That's your choice, she said carefully. Bill nodded. It is. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and offered a polite, almost courteous smile to the table. Thank you for having me. Gasps and whispers rippled through the audience as he stepped away. Cameras scrambled to follow him, while the hosts sat frozen, unsure whether to stop him or let him go. As Bill walked off set, the studio buzzed with nervous energy. Sunny remained seated, her expression composed but tight, clearly aware that the exchange had gone far beyond a typical daytime debate. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation would flood social media, dissected and debated from every angle. Some would praise Bill for standing his ground, calling it a masterclass in shutting down performative outrage. Others would criticize him for walking away instead of listening. Sunny, too, would be both defended and attacked, her words analyzed line by line. But in that moment, under the cooling studio lights, one thing was undeniable. The conversation had exposed a fault line that ran deeper than a single argument. It was a clash not just of personalities, but of worldviews, about speech, power, and who gets to decide where the line is drawn. And as the cameras faded to commercial, the silence left behind spoke louder than anything either of them had said.